Shalom. I'd like to start out by giving all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the Great Millstone. Shalom to the elect of Israel. This is the Mayim in Atlanta, and got this article just popped up on my notifications, so I gave it a look, and that's what we're going to go into today. And this is from Express US, just came out within less than a day, and it says NATO chief warns that the threat of a Russian invasion is real, and it's very real. It is prophesied. NATO, the Lord has put his hooks into the jaws of the Russians, and they are going to end this current world power, the powers that be. Speaking of NATO and the elite that are behind it. It says a NATO army chief has warned of an existential threat from Russia that the alliance might be ill-equipped to handle, joining a growing chorus of experts concerned about Russia potentially launching an attack on NATO amid its third war with Ukraine. And they should. NATO has aggressively expanded from the treaties that were met for them to not expand, and so Russia has been on the offensive. It says British Army Chief General Sir Raleigh Walker, that's the most British name ever, expressed worry that the alliance is not prepared for a possible all-out war with Russia. And yeah, they're not. They have been emasculating their men all of the West for years now, and these troops are not ready for these hardened Russian bears. It says we really have got some serious challenges to deal with collectively, he told a crowd at the Royal United Services Institute on Wednesday. The biggest challenge we face of many is simply a lack of time. And time's running out for you, Esau, because Esau, the Edomites, are who run NATO, the EU, and basically Western society. The Edomites being so-called white people, including the Small Hatters. They have a limited time of rule, of power within this earth. And after this is up, they're going into a hardcore slavery. For just think of all the colonizing they did and all the resource stealing they've done, as well as the lies. There's massive amounts of lies, and ultimately they touch the apple of the Lord's eye, the Israelites, the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, as well as our scattered. And they've committed vast amounts of blasphemy. They're done for. And the Russians are what ends their power. And the Russians being Edomites as well, Esau basically takes out Esau. It says the warning comes a week after satellite images revealed that the Russian military was building up along the NATO borders of Finland and Norway. Finnish military analysts estimate that tens of thousands of soldiers will be gradually deployed to NATO's eastern flank over the coming years. And Lord will, this escalates much more rapidly, a lot quicker than years. We want this to be over soon. The escalation, which U.S. President Donald Trump defiantly dismissed, follows failed peace talks between Russian and Ukrainian officials in Turkey, marking the first time since the war that delegates from the warring countries met in person. The Wall Street Journal reported that President Trump has become increasingly frustrated with his inability to facilitate peace between the two countries. And I want to say he said something along the lines of how this war, if he got into office, this war is going to stop within a day or a week or some quick amount of time, but you can't do that, Trump. It's all prophecy. This is the time you go down. Things you normally do are not going to work out for you. This is the Wall Street Journal reported that, Slovakia. Says, however, the Trump administration successfully secured a lucrative mineral deal with Ukraine, portraying it as a repayment for military and financial support since the war began following Russia's invasion. Always got that eye on resources and wealth. That's why you're going down too, for your greed. The Trump administration's withdrawal from investment in the conflict has prompted European nations to step up their opposition to the Kremlin. In recent months, NATO has bolstered its presence along the eastern flank with Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine to protect against existential threats. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte warned last winter that Russia wanted to wipe Ukraine off the map and could also attack other parts of Europe. And that's not true, because Russia wants to annex Ukraine. They want to take it back into Russia, where it belongs. But Esau's just a bunch of liars and trying to drive war propaganda and make Putin out to be a total madman, which, not saying he's not a madman, but on this other side, on the Western side, they're madmen as well. It says it is time to shift to a wartime mindset, and that's going to be a tough task for these people that have been settled on their leaves and dwelling in this unwalled village, and without any cares. And that goes for all Western society, which, not speaking to America, Babylon the Great, but all of the West is just chilling, not really worried about this stuff. But it is a time of war. So Rutte says, how many more wake-up calls do we need? We should be profoundly concerned. I know I am. In a stark warning, he added, Russia is preparing for long-term confrontation with Ukraine and with us. He said it is time to shift to a wartime mindset. So let's start out at Ecclesiastes 3, because it speaks of the time for war, and we are coming into a time of war. This is Ecclesiastes 3:1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Different times for different things. And it goes into these different times for different things, but we're going to skip down to verse 8. It says a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. We have left that time of peace and we are going into a time of war, which is what we of the hopeful elect should be looking for. We want this time of war, because this time of war will eventually bring a time of peace and a time of love, but for the Israelites. But first we have to get through this time of war. And you think about this kingdom and how it came in so bloody and so violently. It's going to have to go out extremely bloody and violently. This is Revelation 13, because this was concerning NATO. And so let's take a look at NATO within the scriptures. Revelation 13:1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. And the sea is not just like the Atlantic Ocean or the Mediterranean or something like that. The sea is speaking of people. This is Revelation 17:15. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, that whore being America, Babylon the Great, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. That's what the sea is. So the beast, which is a power structure made up of both military, of a financial center, and of a religious center. It's a power structure, an empire almost, but it's not really connected in this time. But you could go to Daniel chapter 7 to read more up on beast, because throughout time there have been different beasts or different power structures that have arisen. And there's also within Daniel 7, it tells you of these different beasts. So it starts with the Assyro-Babylonian Empire, then goes to the Medo-Persian Empire, and then to the Greeks, and then to the Romans, and then Rome fell, and it rose back up again into this now beast, which is NATO and the EU. It's the revision of Rome. So it's not the Antichrist. It's a power structure. There's many Antichrists. So shut up, Christians. Moving on. So this power structure rose up out of the people, having 7 heads. The 7 heads go into the different times that the Edomites, because this is Esau's beast, going into the different times they have had great power on this earth, starting with different kingdoms, you could say, starting with the Greeks and then to the Romans, and then you have the Germania Major and Germania Minor, and then you have Spain, France, and Britain. These are the 7 heads, and then the 10 horns go into certain vassal states of this beast. And it says, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy, because everything they do is really blasphemous and disrespectful to the Lord. They've set themselves up as the Lord, and you can see that through their iconoclasm. Remember, a picture says 1,000 words, so them just turning the images from dark-skinned images into pale images, that's disrespect, and that's blasphemous. And they've pushed this around the world with their colonization and their just refusal to sit at home. It says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, because this is the first time the Edomites had power within the world. So the leopard referring to Alexander the Great, and really going into the Greek Empire. Leopard because he swiftly conquered the known world at that time. So he's referred to as a leopard. And his feet were as the feet of a bear. So it's showing the beginning of it with the leopard, but the end of it is with the bear. That bear are the Russians. They are Edomites, but they're not a part of the beast. They are what ends the beast. They're the feet of it. Russia is referred to as a bear. Not just in scripture, but you see it in the secular world as well. The Russian bear. And his mouth is the mouth of a lion. It's going into UK or Britain. And that's where a lot of the colonizing happened, through the UK. And that's where they speak as well. The financial centers there, and a lot of the elite are over there in UK. I think there's a city-state of London, and that's where the finances are handled. It says, and the dragon, this dragon going back to Rome, gave him his power, because they formed everything off the image of Rome, and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. This is going back to Rome. Rome fell, and it rose back up, and his deadly wound was healed. So that's the rising back up. And so the Renaissance, which means rebirth. Rome fell, Esau fell, and they were in a low position throughout the Dark Ages after the fall of Rome. But then they rose back up for this short season in which they've deceived the whole entire earth. And they reformed Rome, basically. New Rome, Neo-Rome. And it says, and all the world wandered after the beast, because they have established themselves as the dominant force within this earth. We're going to go to Isaiah 13. And down here, because the feet of it that were as a bear, that being the Russians, and the Russians are referred to as Gog and Magog. You'll see that in Ezekiel. But they're also referred to as the Medes, because they hold some of the land that the ancient Medes held. But that they're going to end America and in NATO. Isaiah 13 and 17 says, behold, I will stir up the Medes against them. Medes being the Russians, and they have been stirred up. We're seeing their stir. says, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. And so they're not going to be able to pay off the Russians when they are on the attack, being aggressive. They're not going to, none of the tariffs or any, what else? Tariffs or embargoes or anything they've placed on the Russians to deter them, none of that's going to work out. There's nothing that they can do to stop these Russians from destroying their power structure, destroying their beast. It says, their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces. Those are going into the missiles, because Russia is going to nuke America. And they didn't have a way to explain missiles back in the ancient world, so they called them bows and arrows, and explained it in different ways that were suitable to the ancient world. And it says, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb, their eye shall not spare children. Because nuking America, you're going to kill a lot of babies and children and people that you usually wouldn't call combatants. You're actually punishing at that point. But that's what America and the West deserve. They deserve a lot of violence and a lot of punishment. And that's what the Lord's going to bring. And that's also why we're getting closer and closer to the Lord, because we don't want to be a part of any of this. We want to be taken up, saved by the Lord through the chariots of the Most High, which the world calls UFOs or UAPs. We want to be taken up in those when America gets nuked, because there's nowhere to run or hide. None of these bunkers are going to work, and even if they did, I can't afford that. I know most of us cannot afford that. And so, in which those bunkers are not going to work. But basically the only place to turn is to the Lord. Because they're not going to spare anybody. All of America will be nuked. The land of Israel will be nuked. But the land of Israel will be rebuilt, while America is just going to be an example of wickedness. It says in Babylon, America. And it's also that whore. It mentioned the whore in Revelation 17 when we saw the waters. America has a lot of different names within the scriptures, but here it's calling it Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, because it's been that golden cup within the Lord's hand. It's been this golden city to all of the earth, where everybody wanted to come here, but they just get corrupted coming here. It's been a beacon for all the heathen, for the whole world. But in Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, which the Chaldees were basically sorcerers of the Babylonians, of the Assyro-Babylonian Empire, shall be as when the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah went out with fire, and likewise, America is going to go out in fire. And nobody's going to dwell there again, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Actually, I was planning on stopping at 19, but just to show the point that nobody's going to dwell here, verse 20, it shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation, neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. So it's never going to be inhabited again. It's just going to be a desert wasteland which will be left as an example of how not to be. The Edomites and everything they've pushed is how not to be. They are against the Lord. They tell you within their Christianity the laws are done away with, and then the other segment of Idumea, which are the small hats, they hold the Bible, but they use their Talmud, which is a wicked book. They're examples of how not to be. They're the wicked that are saved for the day of judgment. There's nothing they could do to get out of this judgment as well. And they're done. They're completely done. And so, we're coming into a time of war. if not already in it. Lord willing, this is edifying. I'd like to give all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the Great Millstone. Shalom to the elect of Israel. Shalom.